When Adeline Smith woke up in an unfamiliar room, the last thing she remembered was getting into a car at Seoul's airport. Now she's a prisoner, forced into marriage with Marcelo Kang, the most feared man in Seoul. Her crime? Being the daughter of the man who killed his wife. His plan? To make her suffer for her father's sins. But before we begin, if you love dark romance and mafia stories filled with tension, revenge, and forbidden love, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Drop a like if you're excited for this story, and let me know in the comments what you think will happen to Adeline. Will she survive Marcelo's revenge? Can hatred ever turn into something more? Now, let's dive in. The dungeon door opened for the third time, and Adeline squinted against the light that burned her eyes like fire. 3 more days in absolute darkness. 3 more days with nothing but cold stone beneath her, and silence pressing in from all sides. She didn't fight when the guards pulled her to her feet. Her legs buckled immediately, unable to support her weight after days without food or water. They dragged her up the stairs, through hallways that blurred together, back to the prison that at least had windows and a bed. They left her there, and she collapsed onto the silk sheets that felt obscene against her filthy skin. Within minutes, the door opened again. Kioma entered with her basin of water, her towels, her gentle hands that had tended to Adeline's broken body too many times now. "Let me help you," Kioma said softly, and this time there was something different in her voice. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Adeline could barely speak, her throat raw and her lips cracked and bleeding. Kioma brought water first, small sips so she wouldn't get sick, then began the careful work of cleaning her wounds, washing away the grime and sweat. "You survived again," Kioma said after a long silence. "Barely." Adeline's voice was a rasp. "That's more than most people would manage." Kioma wrung out the cloth, her movements efficient but kind. "The dungeon breaks people. 3 days, then another 3 days? Most would be begging for mercy by now." "I did beg." Adeline closed her eyes, remembering the darkness, the way it had pressed against her until she couldn't tell where she ended and it began. In the dark. When no one could hear me. But not to him. No, not to him. Kioma was quiet for a moment, helping Adeline sit up so she could drink more water. Why not? Adeline thought about that question. Thought about Marcello's face when he'd told her about Yuna, about the grief that lived in his eyes like a permanent shadow. Thought about Ji-ho, that sweet little boy who missed his mother and didn't understand why the world had become so cold. "Because I understand why he hates me," she finally said. "My father killed his wife. Left his son without a mother. How can I blame him for wanting revenge?" Kioma's hands stilled. "You should be careful. You've seen what he's capable of." "I know." Adeline took the cloth from Kioma's hands, pressing it against her own face, feeling the cool water soothe her burning skin. "But I'm not afraid of him anymore. You should be. Maybe." Adeline lowered the cloth, staring at nothing. "But fear isn't going to keep me alive in this place. Understanding might." Kioma studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're different than when you first came here. The darkness changes you." Adeline's laugh was hollow. "Or maybe it just shows you who you really are." Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted in the mansion. It was subtle at first, so subtle Adeline almost didn't notice. But the door to her room stayed unlocked during the day. The guards no longer followed her every movement. And when she found her way to Ji-ho's playroom, when she sat with him and colored and played and made him laugh, no one dragged her away. Marcelo never joined them. She'd catch glimpses of him sometimes, standing in doorways or at the end of hallways, watching with those dark, unreadable eyes. But he never came closer. Never spoke to her beyond the occasional curt order when their paths crossed. But he didn't punish her either. Ji-ho blossomed under her attention. The quiet, wary child she'd first met slowly transformed into someone brighter, more alive. He started running to her when he saw her, his small arms wrapping around her legs, his face lighting up with pure, uncomplicated joy. Adeline, Adeline, look what I made. He'd show her his drawings, his block towers, his elaborate stories about dragons and knights and brave heroes. And every time, Adeline's heart would crack a little more, because this child deserved so much better than the hand fate had dealt him. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden watching the fish in the pond, Ji-ho leaned against her side, his small body warm and trusting. "I like you," he said simply, the way only children could, without filters or fear. "I like you too, Ji-ho. Will you stay?" He looked up at her with Marcelo's eyes, dark and hopeful. "Forever?" Adeline's throat tightened. What could she say to that? That she was a prisoner here? That his father hated her? That she didn't know if she'd survive another week, let alone forever? "I'll stay as long as I can," she said instead, pulling him closer. He seemed satisfied with that answer, returning his attention to the fish. But Adeline sat there, feeling the weight of his trust like a physical thing pressing against her chest. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings with Ji-ho, teaching him things, playing games, reading stories. Afternoons alone in her room, or walking the gardens under the watchful eyes of guards who no longer seemed quite so menacing. Evenings were quieter, lonelier, the mansion settling into shadows and silence. She rarely saw Marcelo. He was always working, always busy with whatever business a Mafia don conducted behind closed doors. Sometimes she'd hear his voice echoing through the halls, speaking rapid Korean or Italian on the phone. Sometimes she'd catch the scent of his cologne lingering in rooms he'd just left, but they never spoke, never acknowledged each other beyond the basic necessities of existing in the same space. Until the night, everything changed. Adeline had just put Ji-ho to bed, reading him 3 stories instead of 1 because he kept asking for, "Just one more, please?" His eyes had finally drifted closed halfway, through a tale about a lonely dragon who found a friend, and she'd sat there for a few extra minutes, watching him sleep, his face peaceful and innocent in a way that made her chest ache. When she finally left his room, the mansion was quiet. Most of the staff had retired for the night. The hallways were dim, lit only by soft accent lights that cast long shadows across marble floors and expensive artwork. Adeline found herself in the living room, drawn to the massive windows that overlooked the gardens. The grounds were illuminated by carefully placed lights, turning the manicured lawns and flower beds into something almost magical. She curled up on one of the sofas, pulling her knees to her chest, and just sat there, thinking about everything and nothing. She thought about her father, about the man she'd believed him to be versus the monster Marcello had revealed. A man who would kill someone's wife. What else had he done? What other horrors had he committed while she was safely tucked away in Africa, saving lives and pretending she didn't come from darkness? The front door slammed open with a crack that shattered the silence. Adeline jumped to her feet, her heart racing, and saw Marcello stumble through the entrance. His suit jacket was torn, his shirt soaked with blood, and one hand pressed against his left side where crimson seeped between his fingers. Their eyes met across the room. His face was pale, his jaw clenched against obvious pain, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then his legs gave out. Adeline ran, her body moving before her mind could catch up. She caught him before he hit the floor, her arms wrapping around his massive frame even though she shouldn't have been able to support his weight. Adrenaline surged through her, made her strong, made her capable of impossible things. "Marcello!" she gasped, struggling under his weight. His hand shot up, gripping her wrist with surprising strength for someone who was bleeding out. "No." He gritted through clenched teeth, his Italian accent thick with pain. "Don't call anyone. Can't trust. Not now." She understood immediately. The Mafia world was built on shifting alliances and hidden betrayals. If someone within his organization had done this, alerting his men could be signing his death warrant. "Okay," she said, her mind already shifting into the clinical detachment she'd learned in medical school. Assess, prioritize, act. "Can you walk?" He nodded faintly, but when he tried to stand, his body swayed dangerously to the side. Adeline adjusted her grip, taking as much of his weight as she could manage. "The couch. Come on. Just a few steps." They made it 3 steps before he nearly collapsed again. She tightened her hold, her muscles screaming in protest, but she got him to the sofa, easing him down as gently as possible. His suit jacket was ruined, soaked through with blood. His white shirt beneath was worse. "I need to see the wound," she said, her hands already moving to his jacket, peeling away the blood-soaked fabric. "Adeline." His voice stopped her. When she looked up, his eyes were clearer than they should have been, focused entirely on her face. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you're bleeding out on your couch," she said simply, returning to her work, getting his jacket off, moving to his shirt. "I've done nothing but hurt you." "I know." She got his shirt open, revealing the bullet wound just below his ribs on the left side. Entry wound, no exit. The bullet was still inside. "We can discuss your extensive list of crimes after I make sure you don't die." A sound escaped him that might have been a laugh or a groan. "Bossy. I'm a doctor. It comes with saving people who probably don't deserve it." She pressed her hand against the wound, applying pressure. He hissed through his teeth, his whole body going rigid. "I need medical supplies. You must have something here." "Bedroom," he managed, his breathing labored. "Walk-in closet, back wall, 3rd shelf pushes in." Of course he had a secret medical stash, probably several throughout the mansion. "Don't move," she ordered, though moving was clearly the last thing on his mind right now. She ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time, her heart pounding. His bedroom was exactly what she expected, massive and expensive and impersonal. The walk-in closet was bigger than most people's bedrooms, lined with suits that cost more than she'd made in a year of residency. She found the back wall, pushed the 3rd shelf, and it swung open to reveal a fully stocked medical kit. Gauze, antiseptic, surgical tools, antibiotics. Everything she needed. Back downstairs, she found Marcello exactly where she'd left him, his eyes closed, his skin ashen. "Stay with me," she said, kneeling beside the couch, spreading out her supplies with practiced efficiency. "Not going anywhere, Piccola," he murmured. And even now, bleeding and broken, that endearment on his lips made something flutter in her chest. She pushed it down, ignored it, focused on the wound. "This is going to hurt," she warned, pulling on the gloves, preparing the antiseptic. She cleaned the wound, her hands steady despite the fear racing through her veins. The bullet was lodged against a rib. She'd have to go in and extract it. No anesthetic beyond what was in the kit. No backup if something went wrong. Just her training, and a man who'd promised to destroy her. "Stay still," she said, preparing the scalpel, "and try not to pass out." His hand caught her wrist, gentler than before. "You don't have to do this." She met his eyes, saw the question there, the confusion, the vulnerability he'd never shown her before. "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." Then she went to work. She worked with the precision of someone who'd operated under much worse conditions. Refugee camps with no electricity, bombs falling in the distance, supplies running out while patients kept coming. This was nothing compared to that. But her hands trembled anyway, because this was Marcello, and somehow that made everything different. The bullet came out clean after 20 agonizing minutes. She'd had to dig deeper than she wanted, feeling him tense beneath her hands with every movement, hearing his breathing turn ragged. But he never cried out, never begged her to stop, just gritted his teeth and endured, his fingers gripping the couch cushions until his knuckles turned white. She stitched him up with careful precision, her training taking over, making each suture perfect. Then she bandaged the wound, administered antibiotics from his stash, and finally sat back on her heels. "Done," she whispered, her whole body shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Marcelo's eyes were half closed, his face still pale but no longer the terrifying gray it had been. His breathing was steadier now, deeper. He was going to make it. "You're better than my usual doctor," he murmured, his voice rough. "Your usual doctor probably doesn't have to work with you bleeding out on a couch." True. His eyes opened fully, finding her face. "Thank you." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with something neither of them wanted to examine too closely. Adeline stood up, her legs unsteady, and started gathering the bloody supplies. "You need to rest. And if you get a fever, or the wound shows any signs of infection, you need proper medical care. Secrecy be damned." She should leave. Should go back to her room, put distance between them, remember that this man had locked her in a cell and promised to break her. But exhaustion pulled at her like a tide, and the thought of climbing those stairs felt impossible. Instead, she found a chair, dragged it close to the couch, and sank into it. "What are you doing?" Marcelo asked. "Making sure you don't die in your sleep." She pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. "Someone needs to monitor you for the next few hours. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm doing it anyway." She met his gaze, held it. "Go to sleep, Marcelo." For a moment she thought he'd argue, but then his eyes drifted closed, and within minutes, his breathing evened out into something that might have been sleep, or might have been unconsciousness. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, watched for any signs of distress, and tried not to think about how different he looked like this. Vulnerable, human. Not the cold, terrifying Don who'd torn her life apart. Just a man who'd been shot and was now healing. Adeline's own eyes grew heavy. She told herself she'd just rest them for a moment. Just a moment. When Marcelo woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold. His side burned with pain, but it was manageable, the kind of pain that meant healing rather than dying. He took stock of his body, testing his limbs, assessing the damage. Then he saw her. Adeline was curled up in the chair beside him, her head tilted at an angle that would give her a terrible neckache when she woke. Her hair had fallen across her face, and there was blood on her clothes, his blood, dried to a rusty brown. She looked exhausted even in sleep. Dark circles under her eyes, her face thinner than when she'd first arrived at his mansion. He'd done that to her. The cell, the isolation, the psychological torture. He'd taken a woman who'd spent years saving lives and turned her into this fragile thing who looked like she might shatter at any moment. And yet, she'd saved him. When she could have let him bleed out, could have called his men and risked him dying from betrayal, could have simply walked away and let fate take its course, she'd stayed. She'd operated on him with hands that shouldn't have been steady after everything he'd put her through. She'd stayed awake to watch over him, to make sure he survived the night. Why? Marcelo couldn't understand it. Couldn't reconcile the woman sleeping in that chair with the daughter of the man who'd killed Una. William Smith's blood ran through her veins. His sins were her inheritance. She should hate him, should want him dead. But instead, she'd saved his life. He found himself studying her face, really looking at her for the first time since he'd dragged her into this nightmare. She was beautiful in a way he'd refused to acknowledge before. Not like Una, who'd been all softness and gentle smiles. Adeline had an edge to her, a strength that showed in the set of her jaw, the determined line of her mouth even in sleep. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and for a moment they just stared at each other in the morning light. "You're awake," she said, sitting up quickly, wincing as her neck protested. "How do you feel? Any fever? Dizziness? Nausea?" "I'm fine." His voice came out rougher than he intended. Thanks to you. She stood, moving to his side, her hand reaching for his forehead to check for fever. The touch was clinical, professional, but Marcelo felt it like a brand against his skin. When was the last time someone had touched him with gentleness? When was the last time he'd allowed it? No fever, she said, pulling her hand back. That's good. You'll need to take it easy for at least a week. No strenuous activity. The stitches need time to heal. I don't have time to take it easy. Then make time. She crossed her arms, and there was that defiance again, that refusal to back down even when facing someone who could destroy her. Unless you want to tear your stitches and bleed out after I spent half the night keeping you alive. You didn't have to do that. He pushed himself up to sitting, gritting his teeth against the pain. You could have left me. I could have, she agreed. But I didn't. Why? The question came out more forcefully than he intended. Why help me, Adeline? After everything I've done to you? She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Because despite everything you've done, despite the cruelty and the hatred and the promises to break me, you're not the monster you want everyone to think you are. You don't know what I am. Don't I? She stepped closer, and he could smell her now, something clean and simple beneath the copper scent of his blood on her clothes. I see the way you look at Ji-ho. I see how you've stopped punishing me for spending time with him. I see the man beneath all that rage, Marcelo, the one who's drowning in grief and doesn't know how to swim. Her words hit him like physical blows. He wanted to deny them, wanted to retreat back behind his walls, but she'd seen too much. Saved him when she shouldn't have. Cared when she had every reason not to. You should go, he said, his voice tight. Clean up. Rest. You look like hell. A smile flickered across her face. You're not much better. I was shot. And I operated on you without anesthesia on your living room couch. I think we're both entitled to look like hell. Despite everything, despite the pain and the confusion and the walls he was desperately trying to rebuild, Marcelo felt his lips twitch. Almost a smile. Almost. Adeline seemed to take that as her cue to leave. She gathered the bloody supplies, headed toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. Marcelo. What? Don't get shot again. I'm not sure my hands could take another surgery. Then she was gone, leaving him alone with the sunlight and the pain in his side and thoughts he didn't want to examine. Over the next few days, something shifted between them. Marcelo found himself tracking Adeline's movements through the mansion, listening for her voice, watching from his office window as she played with Ji-ho in the garden. She'd changed since that night. Or maybe he was just seeing her differently now. She laughed more easily with his son, ran through the grass chasing him, her face bright with joy that shouldn't exist in a prison. Ji-ho adored her. That much was obvious. He'd light up whenever she entered a room, would grab her hand and drag her to see his latest drawing or accomplishment. Look, Adeline, I can count to 20 now. Watch me jump off this step. Can we read the dragon story again? And she never said no. Never looked at Ji-ho like he was an inconvenience or a reminder of everything wrong in her life. She just loved him, simply and completely, the way children deserve to be loved. Marcelo found himself inviting her to breakfast one morning. He didn't plan it, didn't think it through. She was walking past the dining room and the words just came out. Join me. She stopped, turned, her eyebrows raised in surprise. Are you asking or ordering? Does it matter? Yes. He set down his coffee, meeting her gaze. I'm asking. Something shifted in her expression. She walked into the dining room, took the seat across from him, and accepted the coffee his staff immediately poured for her. They ate in silence at first, neither quite sure what to say. Then Marcelo noticed what she was wearing. Shorts. Tiny denim shorts that showed off long legs he had no business noticing, and a tank top, white and fitted, that left very little to the imagination. His jaw tightened. He'd had clothes sent to her room. Appropriate clothes. modest clothes. And she'd chosen to wear this. "What the hell are you wearing?" The words came out harsher than he intended. She looked down at herself, then back up at him, one eyebrow raised. "Shorts and a tank top. It's summer, Marcelo. It's hot outside." "You're half naked." "I'm fully clothed, actually. This is what normal people wear when they're not trying to impress Mafia dons." "My staff can see you," Marcelo said, his voice dropping lower, something dangerous creeping into his tone. Adeline took a deliberate sip of her coffee, holding his gaze over the rim of her cup. "Your staff has seen me in much worse condition. Covered in blood, dragged from the dungeon, barely conscious. I think they can handle seeing my knees." His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking there that Adeline found herself fascinated by. She was playing with fire, she knew that. But something about the way his eyes darkened when he looked at her, the way his controlled facade cracked just slightly, made her want to push, to see what would happen when the ice finally melted. "Change," he ordered. "No." The single word hung between them like a challenge. Adeline watched his knuckles turn white around his coffee cup, watched him wrestle with his temper, his control, whatever demons were telling him to put her back in her place. "You're my wife," he said finally, each word carefully measured. "You'll dress appropriately." "I'm your prisoner," she corrected, leaning forward slightly. "There's a difference, Marcelo, and prisoners don't take fashion advice from their captors." For a moment she thought he might actually reach across the table and… what? She wasn't sure. The air between them felt electric, charged with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite something else. Then Ji-ho came running into the dining room, his small feet pattering against marble, and the spell broke. "Papa! Adeline!" He climbed into the chair next to Adeline, his face bright with excitement. "Can we go see the fish today? Please?" Marcelo's expression shifted immediately, all that dangerous intensity melting into something softer as he looked at his son. "After breakfast, maybe." "You should come too, Papa. You never come to see the fish with us." Something flickered across Marcelo's face. Pain, maybe, or guilt. "I have work, Ji-ho." "You always have work." The little boy's face fell, and Adeline felt her heart crack. She reached over, ruffling his hair. "How about this? After breakfast, you and I will go see the fish, and we'll draw pictures of them to show your papa later. Would that be okay?" Ji-ho brightened immediately. "Okay. Can we draw the orange one? He's my favorite." "We can draw all of them if you want." Adeline glanced at Marcelo and found him watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was longing there, and something that looked almost like envy, as if he wanted to be part of this simple moment but didn't know how. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, Adeline saw past all his walls, saw the man who wanted to be a good father but was too consumed by rage and grief to remember how, saw the loneliness that came from pushing everyone away, even the people you loved most. Then he looked away, returning his attention to his breakfast, and the moment passed. But Adeline couldn't stop thinking about it. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Breakfast with Marcelo became a regular occurrence, though they rarely spoke beyond basic pleasantries. He'd ask about Ji-ho. She'd tell him about their day. Sometimes their hands would brush, reaching for the same thing, and Adeline would feel electricity spark up her arm. She'd catch him watching her from his office window as she played with Ji-ho in the garden. Not with the cold assessment of before, but with something warmer. Something that made her skin flush even when she was 3 floors below. At night, she'd lie in her bed and think about him in ways she shouldn't. The way his shirt had clung to his muscled frame when she'd operated on him. The sound of his voice when he called her Piccola. The rare moments when he almost smiled, and she felt like she'd won something precious. It was madness. She knew it was madness. This man had tortured her, locked her in darkness, promised to break her. She should hate him. but hatred was becoming harder to hold on to when she could see the cracks in his armor, the humanity underneath all that ice. One night, unable to sleep, Adeline found herself wandering the mansion. It was past midnight, the halls quiet except for the occasional guard making rounds. She wasn't sure where she was going until she found herself outside the library, drawn by a soft light spilling under the door. She pushed it open quietly and found Marcello standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the darkened grounds. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. He didn't turn around, but she saw his shoulders tense at the sound of her voice. "I could ask you the same thing. I asked first." A sound that might have been a laugh escaped him. "Fair enough." He took a sip of his whiskey. "Sleep and I have never been good friends. Especially not lately." Adeline moved into the room, drawn to him like gravity. Nightmares? Memories? Sometimes they're worse. She understood that. She had her own memories that haunted her in the dark hours. "Want company?" she asked. "Or should I go?" Marcello finally turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He looked tired, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him. The carefully constructed mask had slipped, and underneath was just a man carrying too much weight. "Stay," he said quietly. "Please." That single word, "please," felt like the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Adeline moved to the small bar cart in the corner, poured herself a glass of wine, then settled into one of the leather chairs near the window. Marcello took the chair across from her, and for a long moment, they just sat in comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Adeline finally said. "You can ask. I may not answer." She studied him for a moment, taking in the sharp lines of his face, the way he held himself even now, relaxed in a chair with whiskey in hand. "Your accent. It slips sometimes when you're angry or other times. Italian, right?" He glanced at her, something flickering in his eyes. "You noticed. Hard not to. And your name, Marcello. It's not Korean." "No, it's not." Silence stretched between them. Adeline waited, sensing that pushing would only make him retreat. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "I wasn't always Marcello Kang. The Kang part is real. Korean. From before." He took a drink. "The Marcello came later. Italy." "You were raised there?" "Eventually." His jaw tightened. "Wasn't supposed to be. Was supposed to stay here in Seoul. In an orphanage." The way he said it made Adeline's stomach drop. There was a story there. Something dark. "What happened?" she asked softly. Marcello was quiet for a long moment, staring into his glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless in a way that made it worse. "Men came when I was 7. Made promises. Families. Better lives. The orphanage let them take us." He paused. "They sold us. A trafficking operation. One of the largest in Asia." Adeline's hand flew to her mouth, tears already burning her eyes. "I ended up in Italy, with people who shouldn't have had access to children." He took another drink, his hand steady despite the weight of what he was saying. "Then Don Fabio Romano found me. He saw what was happening and intervened. Took me out of that situation." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "He saved me. Took me in. Gave me his name, Marcello Romano Kang. Taught me everything. How to survive. How to build something better." Marcello's eyes were distant now, seeing something from years ago. "He became my father. The only one that mattered." Adeline's throat was tight. "And the men who trafficked you? All here, in Seoul." His eyes refocused on her, sharp and cold. "Your father ran the operation. He and his partners came to that orphanage. They took me. Sold me." The words hit Adeline like physical blows. Her father. Her father had done this to him. Had stolen his childhood, his innocence, everything. "I came back to destroy them all. Marcelo continued, his voice quiet but lethal. To make them pay for every life they ruined. And I was doing well until your father decided to test me. To see if the rumors about me were true. His hand tightened around his glass. He took Yuna to provoke me. Adeline felt sick. She'd grown up knowing exactly what kind of man her father was, but she'd never let herself imagine the cruelty of her father's organization. Until now. Until Marcelo. I didn't know, she whispered, tears streaming down her face now. God, Marcelo, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have. You were a child. His voice was gentler now. He leaned forward, and to her surprise, he reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. You're not your father, Adeline. I know that now. Then why are you still doing this? She looked at him through her tears. Why keep me here if you know I'm not him? Because I don't know how to stop. His voice cracked slightly. Revenge is all I've had for so long. Without it, I don't know who I am. Adeline understood that. She understood it so completely it hurt. They were both prisoners, she realized. Her in this mansion. Him in his grief and rage. You're more than your revenge, she said, reaching out to cover his hand with hers. You're Jiho's father. You're the man who saved Kioma and probably dozens of others. You're someone who's been hurt so badly you forgot how to heal. And you think you can heal me? His voice was rough, but he didn't pull his hand away. You think understanding can fix what's broken? No. She squeezed his hand. But maybe we can be broken together. Maybe that's enough. Marcelo stared at her for a long moment, and Adeline could see the war happening behind his eyes. The part of him that wanted to believe her fighting against the part that had spent years building walls no one could breach. Then he moved. He stood, pulling her up with him, and suddenly they were inches apart, his hand still holding hers, his other hand coming up to cup her face. This is a terrible idea, he murmured, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Probably the worst, she agreed, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst. I'm going to hurt you. Eventually, I always hurt everyone. Then hurt me. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. I'm already broken anyway. What's a little more damage? He made a sound that was half laugh, half groan, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like Adeline had imagined. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and hungry and full of years of pain and loneliness on both sides. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she rose on her toes, pressing against him, needing to be as close as possible. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Marcelo rested his forehead against hers. Piccola, he whispered, and the endearment sounded different now. Not mocking or distant, but tender. Reverent. Marcelo, she breathed back, and felt him shudder at the sound of his name on her lips. They stood there in this dim library, holding each other like lifelines, and Adeline knew everything had changed. There was no going back from this moment. No pretending they were just captor and prisoner anymore. They were something else now. Something complicated and messy and probably doomed. But as Marcelo kissed her again, softer this time, almost sweet, Adeline found she didn't care about doom or consequences or the impossibility of it all. She just cared about this. About him. About the way he made her feel alive for the first time since waking up in his mansion. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Finally he pulled back, his breathing ragged, his eyes dark with something that made her knees weak. You should go, he said, but his hands were still on her face, his thumb still tracing patterns on her skin. Before I do something we're not ready for. Adeline wanted to argue, wanted to stay, but she could see the restraint in his eyes, the way he was holding himself back. And maybe he was right. Maybe they needed to take this slow, to be sure. Okay, she whispered. He walked her to the library door, their hands linked, neither wanting to be the first to let go. At the threshold, he pulled her back for one more kiss, this one slow and deep and full of promise. "Sleep well, Piccola," he murmured against her lips. She didn't sleep well. She barely slept at all. The next morning at breakfast, the air between them was electric. Adeline walked into the dining room wearing another tank top, light blue this time, and saw Marcelo's eyes darken the moment he saw her. His gaze traced over her shoulders, down her arms, lingering on the curves the fitted top emphasized. "Good morning," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Morning." His voice was rougher than usual, and he didn't look away from her as she sat down. They ate in charged silence, every accidental brush of hands when reaching for something sending sparks up Adeline's arm. She could feel his eyes on her, could see him watching the way she brought her coffee cup to her lips, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. "You're staring," she said finally, unable to take the tension anymore. "I know." He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Can't seem to stop. Heat flooded her cheeks. "Marcelo." "Papa?" "Adeline." Ji-ho came running in, and the spell broke. But not completely. Even as they both turned their attention to the little boy, Adeline could feel Marcelo's awareness of her like a physical touch. The days that followed were torture in the best possible way. Every breakfast became an exercise in restraint. Every accidental meeting in the hallways made Adeline's heart race. She'd catch Marcelo watching her from his office window as she played with Ji-ho, and when their eyes met, the heat in his gaze made her forget how to breathe. One afternoon, she was in the kitchen getting juice for Ji-ho when Marcelo walked in. The kitchen staff immediately made themselves scarce, and suddenly they were alone in the enormous space. "I was looking for you," he said, leaning against the counter, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Well, you found me." She tried to sound casual, but her voice came out breathier than intended. "I did." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her neck. "I keep finding you everywhere I look." "Is that a problem?" "Yes." His thumb traced her jawline, and Adeline's eyes fluttered closed. "Because every time I see you, I want to do this." He kissed her, backing her against the counter, his hands on her waist pulling her closer. Adeline melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest to loop around his neck. The kiss was different from the ones in the library, more confident, more demanding, full of days of pent-up wanting. Someone cleared their throat. They sprang apart to find one of the kitchen staff standing in the doorway, eyes wide, clearly mortified. "I'm so sorry, sir, I just needed to—" "Out," Marcelo said, his voice cold and commanding, not even looking at the staff member. His eyes stayed locked on Adeline. The staff member fled. The moment the door swung shut, Marcelo's hand slid to the back of Adeline's neck, possessive and firm. "My office. Now." It wasn't a request. He didn't wait for her answer, just took her hand and led her through the mansion, his grip unbreakable. Staff members they passed quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in their tasks. He pulled her into his office, closed the door, locked it. The click of the lock made Adeline's heart race. "Marcelo. Do you know what you do to me?" His voice was low, dangerous as he stalked toward her. "Walking around in those little outfits, playing with my son, making yourself at home in my house like you own it? I thought that's what you wanted. For me to take care of Ji-ho." "What I want," he said, backing her against his desk, his hands on either side of her, caging her in, "is to have you in my bed. But I won't rush this. When I take you, Piccola, you're going to be ready. You're going to beg for it." Heat flooded through Adeline's body. "Confident, aren't you?" His smile was predatory. "I know what I see in your eyes every time you look at me, the way you tremble when I touch you, the way you catch your breath when I'm near." His hand slid up her thigh, stopping just before it became truly inappropriate. "You want me just as much as I want you. And what if I do?" Then you'll wait. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. Until I decide you've waited long enough. He pushed away from the desk, leaving her breathless and wanting, and returned to his chair like nothing had happened. Now get out. I have work to do. Adeline stared at him, frustrated in equal measure. You're insufferable. And you love it. He didn't look up from the papers on his desk. Close the door on your way out. The next few days were deliberate torture, and Adeline knew Marcelo was doing it on purpose. He'd brush past her in hallways, his hand grazing her lower back. He'd watch her at breakfast with those dark eyes that promised everything and gave nothing. He'd find excuses to touch her, fixing her hair, wiping something from her cheek, his fingers lingering just a second too long. But he never kissed her again, never pulled her aside for another stolen moment. He was making her wait, making her want, and it was working. One evening, she was reading to Ji-ho when Marcelo appeared in the doorway. Their eyes met over the little boy's head, and the heat in his gaze made her stumble over the words. After Ji-ho was asleep, Adeline found Marcelo in his study, nursing a glass of whiskey. "You're playing games with me," she said from the doorway. He looked up, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Am I?" "You know you are." She walked into the room, closing the door behind her. "Why?" "Because I can." He set down his glass, leaned back in his chair. "Because watching you want me is almost as satisfying as having you would be." "Almost?" "Almost." His eyes raked over her body, possessive and hungry. "Come here." Adeline's feet moved before her brain could engage. She crossed to his desk, stood in front of him, her heart pounding. "Closer." She moved around the desk. He reached out, pulled her onto his lap, his arm banding around her waist to hold her there. The position was intimate, possessive, and Adeline could feel every hard line of his body against hers. "I've been patient," he murmured against her neck. "Giving you time to be sure, but my patience is running out, Piccola." "Then stop being patient." Her voice was breathless. His hand slid up her thigh, under the hem of her shorts, and she gasped. "Careful what you ask for." "I know what I'm asking for." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching hers. Not for permission. Marcelo didn't ask for permission, but for certainty. "Tonight. My room. Midnight." It wasn't a question. It was a command. "Why not now?" she challenged. "Because anticipation makes everything sweeter." His hand tightened on her thigh. Heat pooled low in Adeline's stomach. Confident. Always. He lifted her off his lap, set her on her feet. "Now go. Before I change my mind about waiting." That evening felt endless. Adeline tried to read, to watch TV, to do anything to make the time pass faster. She showered, dried her hair, changed into a simple nightgown. Every minute felt like an hour. At midnight, exactly, she walked to his room. The door was unlocked. She stepped inside to find Marcelo standing by the window, shirtless, his back to her. The moonlight illuminated the plains of muscle, the scars that mapped his survival. "Close the door," he said without turning around. She did. The click seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. "Lock it." Her hands trembled as she turned the lock. Finally, he turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. This was Marcelo unleashed. No walls, no restraint, just raw desire and possession. "Come here, Piccola." She crossed to him, her heart racing. When she was close enough, his hand shot out, tangling in her hair, pulling her against him for a kiss that was claiming, consuming, demanding everything she had to give. "Last chance," he murmured against her lips, but there was no question in his voice. He knew she wasn't going anywhere. "I'm not going anywhere." "Good." His hands found the straps of her nightgown. "Because once I start, I'm not stopping until I've had every part of you. I'm not changing my mind." She covered his hands with hers. "Are you?" Never. He kissed her, deep and possessive, his hand sliding into her hair. I've wanted this since the moment you defied me. Since you walked into my son's playroom and loved him like he was yours. Since you saved my life when you should have let me bleed out. His words sent shivers through her. This was Marcelo stripped of pretense, dominant, possessive, utterly in control even in his desire. The nightgown fell away under his expert hands, pooling at her feet. His eyes raked over her body with an intensity that made her feel like she was burning. Perfect, he murmured, his hands skimming her sides. Every inch of you is mine now, Piccola. Say it. Yours, she breathed. Again. Yours, Marcelo. I'm yours. That's right. He lifted her, effortlessly, carrying her to the bed. And I take care of what's mine. He laid her down with surprising gentleness given the hunger in his eyes. Then he followed her down, his body covering hers, his weight a delicious pressure that made her arch beneath him. What followed was intense and passionate and overwhelming. Marcelo was both demanding and attentive, taking what he wanted while making sure she felt every moment of it. He touched her like he owned her, kissed her like he was branding her, moved with a possessiveness that should have scared her, but only made her want him more. Look at me, he commanded when her eyes fluttered closed. I want to see your face when I make you mine. Adeline's eyes opened, locking with his, and the intensity there stole her breath. This was Marcelo completely unleashed, powerful, dangerous, utterly in control even as he gave himself to her. When she finally shattered in his arms, he silenced her with a kiss, and when he followed her moments later, the sound he made against her mouth was nothing but satisfaction. After, as they lay tangled together, Marcelo pulled her against his chest possessively, his arm banded around her waist. You're not going back to your room, he said. It wasn't a question. No? No. You sleep here now, in my bed, where I can have you whenever I want. A thrill ran through Adeline at his commanding tone. And if I say no? He rolled, pinning her beneath him, his eyes glinting with dark amusement. Then I'll just have to convince you. He proceeded to do exactly that, and by the time dawn broke over the mansion, Adeline had agreed to everything he demanded and then some. She fell asleep in his arms, utterly claimed, utterly his, and she'd never felt safer in her life. Morning light filtered through the massive windows, painting gold across tangled sheets and bare skin. Adeline woke slowly, awareness returning in pieces. The unfamiliar room, the expensive silk beneath her, the warm, solid presence behind her, an arm locked possessively around her waist. Marcelo. She shifted slightly and his arm tightened immediately, pulling her back against his chest. Where do you think you're going? His voice was rough with sleep, his lips brushing her shoulder. Nowhere, I was just... good. He pressed a kiss to her neck, then another, trailing down to her collarbone. Because you're not leaving this bed until I say so. Adeline turned in his arms to face him, and her breath caught. In the morning light, with his hair tousled and his guard completely down, he was devastating. The hard lines of his face were softer now, almost peaceful. Do you miss her? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Marcelo's hand stilled where it had been tracing patterns on her hip. Yuna. Yes. Adeline's heart pounded. I know you loved her. I know she was your wife, Jiho's mother. And now I'm here, in your bed, and I need to know. For a long moment, Marcelo was quiet. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. I think about her every day, he said finally, his voice low and honest. I see her in Jiho's smile, in the garden she loved, in the photo by his bed that he kisses goodnight. Adeline's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. But when I'm with you, his dark eyes locked with hers. I'm not thinking about anyone but you, Adeline. This isn't about replacing her. It's about choosing to live again instead of just surviving. Relief flooded through her, followed by something deeper. Love, maybe, or the beginning of it becoming something permanent. I'll never try to replace her, Adeline whispered. I just want to be part of your life. Yours and Ji-ho's. You already are. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. You became part of us the moment you chose to save me instead of letting me bleed out. The moment you loved my son when you had every reason to hate everything connected to me. I could never hate Ji-ho. I know. His lips found hers, soft and slow. That's why this works, Piccola. That's why you're mine now. They came together again as the sun climbed higher, slow and tender this time. And when Adeline finally fell back against the pillows, Marcelo pulled her against his chest possessively. You're not going back to your room, he said, his tone brooking no argument. Your things will be moved here today. Is that an order? Yes. His hand slid down her spine, possessive and sure. You sleep in my bed now, where I can have you whenever I want. Heat pooled low in Adeline's stomach. And if I want you? His smile was predatory. Then you take me. You're mine, Piccola, but I'm yours too. That's how this works. The days that followed existed in a bubble of bliss that Adeline had never experienced before. She'd wake up in Marcelo's arms, sometimes to his hands already on her body, already claiming her before she was fully conscious. Other times, she'd wake first and showered him with kisses while he slept, learning what made his breath hitch, what made him groan and pull her beneath him. Breakfast became their public time, sitting across from each other at the massive dining table, their feet tangling beneath it, eyes locked in silent promises of what would happen when they were alone again. The staff learned quickly to give them privacy, to disappear when the air between them grew too charged. One morning, Ji-ho joined them, climbing into the chair next to Adeline with his usual enthusiasm. Adeline, you're here for breakfast again. His face was bright with joy. Are you staying now? For always? Adeline glanced at Marcelo, unsure how to answer, but Marcelo's expression was soft as he looked at his son. Yes, he said simply. Adeline lives here now. With us. Really? Ji-ho's eyes went wide. Like a family? Yes, Ji-ho, like a family. The little boy launched himself at Adeline, wrapping his small arms around her neck. I'm so happy. Now I have Papa and Adeline and we can all be together. Adeline held him close, tears burning her eyes as she met Marcelo's gaze over Ji-ho's head. The look in his eyes made her chest ache, possessive and tender and full of something that looked like hope. After breakfast, they'd spend time with Ji-ho. Adeline would play with him in the garden while Marcelo watched from his office window, and sometimes he'd join them, his massive frame folding down to Ji-ho's level as they built block towers or drew pictures. Papa, look, I drew our family. Ji-ho held up a picture with 3 stick figures. That's you, that's me, and that's Adeline. Marcelo took the drawing with careful hands, studying it like it was the most precious thing in the world. It's perfect, son. We'll put it on the fridge. And we can add Mama too, Ji-ho added, his voice innocent and hopeful. She's in heaven, but she's still part of our family, right? Something flickered across Marcelo's face. Pain, yes, but also acceptance. Yes, she'll always be part of our family. Adeline watched this exchange with her heart in her throat. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, but making room for new love alongside old grief. The afternoons were theirs. Marcelo would finish his work, find Adeline wherever she was in the mansion, and take her somewhere private. Sometimes his office, door locked, pressed against his desk. Sometimes the library, where it had all started, reliving that first kiss. Sometimes just his bedroom, taking his time with her, leaving her breathless and undone. You're insatiable, she gasped one afternoon, sprawled across his bed, her body still trembling from their time together. Only for you. He kissed his way up her spine, his hands never still on her body. I spent weeks wanting you and not having you. I'm making up for lost time. I'm not complaining. Good. He rolled her over, settling between her. Because I'm not nearly done with you yet. Evenings were family time. Dinner with Jiho, then reading him stories, tucking him in together like the family they were becoming. Jiho started asking Adeline to stay for the bedtime routine, then started reaching for her hand when they walked through the mansion, then started calling her something that made both Adeline and Marcelo freeze the first time they heard it. Good night, Papa. Good night, Mama. Adeline's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Marcelo, unsure if this was okay, if it was too soon, if it dishonored Yuna's memory. But Marcelo just smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. Good night, Jiho. We love you. Love you too. The little boy yawned, already half asleep. In the hallway, after they'd closed Jiho's door, Marcelo pulled Adeline into his arms. Is that okay? She whispered. Him calling me that? It's more than okay. His voice was rough with emotion. Yuna would have wanted him to have a mother figure, to have love, and you love him like he's yours. He is mine, in every way that matters. I know. He kissed her, deep and possessive. That's why you're perfect for us. 2 weeks into their bubble of happiness, Adeline started noticing small changes. Marcelo would get phone calls and step out of the room, his voice low and tense. He'd disappear into his office for hours, emerging with a distracted air that he'd try to hide behind kisses and touches. One night, she woke to find his side of the bed empty. She found him standing by the window, glass of whiskey in hand, staring out at the darkened grounds. Can't sleep? She asked softly, wrapping a blanket around herself. Just thinking. He didn't turn around. She moved closer, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. About what? The future. His voice was distant. What comes next? Something in his tone made anxiety spike in Adeline's chest. Marcelo, what's going on? Nothing you need to worry about. He turned, pulling her against him, but there was something off in the embrace. Something not quite right. Go back to bed, Piccola, I'll be there soon. But he wasn't. When she woke the next morning, he was already gone, a note on the pillow saying he had business to attend to. At breakfast, he was quieter than usual, distracted. His phone kept buzzing, and each time he looked at it, his jaw would tighten. Everything okay? Adeline asked. Fine. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. Just some business matters I need to handle. Over the next few days, the distance grew. Not in the physical sense. He still reached for her at night, still claimed her with the same intensity. But there was something in his eyes, something pulling him away from their bubble even as he tried to hold on to it. Adeline would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Sadness, maybe. Or regret. Like he was trying to memorize her before something took her away. Marcelo, talk to me, she said one night after they'd made love. Something's wrong. I can feel it. Nothing's wrong. He pulled her against his chest, his arm tight around her waist. I'm just thinking about some things I need to take care of. What things? Business. His voice was firm, closing down the conversation. Don't worry about it. But Adeline did worry, because she'd seen this before, this pulling away, this emotional distance even in physical closeness. She'd seen it in the way her father used to act before making a major move in his business. Marcelo was planning something big, something he didn't want to tell her about. And as she lay in his arms that night, listening to his heartbeat beneath her ear, feeling his fingers trace absent patterns on her skin, Adeline felt fear creep into their perfect bubble for the first time. Whatever he was planning, whatever business he needed to handle, she had a sinking feeling it had everything to do with her father. and nothing good could come from that. The breaking point came 3 days later. Adeline woke to find Marcelo already dressed, standing by the window with his back to her. There was something in his posture, something final, that made her stomach drop. Marcelo. She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. He didn't turn around. You need to leave. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. What? I'm arranging safe passage for you. Out of Korea. My men will take you wherever you want to go. Europe, America, anywhere. You'll have money, documents, everything you need to start over. His voice was cold, controlled, the walls back up and reinforced. You leave tomorrow. Adeline felt like she'd been slapped. I don't understand. Last night Last night was a mistake. He finally turned to face her, and his expression was that icy mask she hadn't seen in weeks. All of this was a mistake. You don't mean that. She stood, wrapping the sheet tighter around herself. After everything, after these past weeks, you can't just... I can, and I am. His jaw was tight, a muscle ticking there. This ends now, Adeline. You go back to your life, and I handle my business. Your business. Understanding crashed over her. You mean my father. You're going to kill him. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. I've waited long enough. Made my plans. Tomorrow night, Will Smith dies, and you're not going to be here when it happens. So what was all of this? Her voice rose, anger and hurt warring in her chest. The past 2 weeks? The family dinners? Ji-ho calling me mama? Was that all just a distraction? A way to pass the time before you went back to your revenge? Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. But his voice remained steady. It was a detour. One I shouldn't have taken. You're Will Smith's daughter. And that will never change. I can't have both you and justice. Why not? She moved toward him, desperate. Why can't you have both? Because I'm going to end him. The words were brutal, final. And I won't make you watch that. I won't make you live with that. You think sending me away makes it better? Tears streamed down her face now. You think I won't know? Won't feel it? Marcelo, please. My decision is final. He turned away from her again. Pack your things. You leave at dawn. What about Ji-ho? Her voice broke on his name. You're just going to let him wake up and find me gone? After he's already lost one mother? That hit him. She saw his shoulders tense, saw his hands clench into fists. He'll understand eventually. No, he won't. He's 3 years old. He'll just know that another person he loved left him. Adeline's voice hardened with determination. I'm not leaving, Marcelo. Not unless you drag me out of here yourself. He spun around, crossing the room in 3 long strides, his hand wrapped around her throat. Not tight, not threatening, just reminding her who held the power here. Don't test me, Piccola, he said, his voice deadly quiet. I've killed men for less than defiance. Then kill me. She held his gaze, refusing to back down. Because I'm not leaving. Not you. Not Ji-ho. Not this life we've built. If you want me gone, you'll have to make me go. They stared at each other, the air crackling with tension. His hand tightened slightly on her throat, and Adeline's heart raced, but not entirely with fear. Why? He finally asked, his voice rough. Why fight for this? For me? Because I love you, you idiot. The words came out fierce, absolute. I love you and I love Ji-ho, and I'm not letting you throw away everything we have because you think murder is the only answer. It is the only answer. No, it's not. She grabbed his wrist, the one connected to the hand at her throat. You kill my father, what happens next? His organization retaliates. Then you retaliate back. Then they come for you harder. It never ends, Marcelo. The cycle just keeps going. I can handle his people. I know you can, But is that the world you want Jiho to grow up in? Constant retaliation? Always looking over his shoulder? Never knowing if today is the day someone finally gets through your defenses? Her voice cracked. You end my father's life. You get 30 seconds of satisfaction. Then you get a lifetime of war. Is that what you want for our son? She saw the words hit him. Our son. Not just his son. Theirs. There's a better way, she continued, pressing her advantage. One that ends this without starting a war, without making Ji-ho grow up in constant danger. What way? Legal justice. She saw him about to protest and rushed on. I know, you have connections, judges, prosecutors in your pocket. Use them. We trap my father, get him to confess, and you make sure he goes to prison. Real prison, not some deal. Marcelo's hand fell from her throat, but his expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew colder. You think prison will hold him? His laugh was hollow. You think that's how this world works, Piccola? What do you mean? Your father is a Mafia don, just like me. We don't go to prison, Adeline. We control the prisons. We control the judges, the prosecutors, the guards. He turned away from her, running a hand through his hair. Even if I got him convicted, even if I used every connection I have, he'd be out in 2 years, maybe less. And then what? He comes back angrier, more dangerous, ready to destroy everything I love as revenge. But no. His voice was final. Prison isn't revenge. It's a vacation with walls. Your father would spend his time inside making new connections, building new networks, planning his retaliation. That's not justice. That's just delaying the inevitable. Adeline felt her argument crumbling. She'd grown up in this world. She knew he was right. Her father had connections everywhere, money hidden in places even Marcelo couldn't reach. A prison sentence wouldn't break him. It would just make him more dangerous. Then let me come with you, she said quietly. Marcelo turned to look at her, surprise flickering across his face. What? When you go to kill him, let me come with you. Her voice was steady now, resolved. Not to save him, not to stop you. I need to talk to him first. I need to hear it from his own mouth. Adeline. Please. She moved closer to him. I need to know that the man I loved as a child is really gone. I need to ask him if he regrets any of it. Yuna, the children, everything. I need to give him one last chance to be the father I remember, even if it's just for a moment. Tears streamed down her face. And if he can't, if there's nothing left worth saving, then I need to be there when you pull that trigger. I need to see it end so I can finally let him go. Marcelo studied her face for a long moment, searching for something. Finally, he nodded slowly. Okay, he said quietly. You can come. But Adeline, when I pull that trigger, there's no going back. You'll have to live with that image for the rest of your life. I know. She took a shaky breath. But I need this closure. I need to know I tried everything before. She couldn't finish the sentence. Then we do this together. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Tomorrow night. The safe house in Seongbuk-dong looked exactly as Adeline remembered from childhood. Overgrown, abandoned, a secret her father had shared with her when she was 12. If anything ever goes wrong, he'd told her then, this is where you come. No one else knows about this place. Now she was using that knowledge to lure him to his death. The call had been brief, Adeline's voice shaking with real fear this time, not manufactured. Dad, I need you. I'm at the old safe house in Seongbuk-dong. Please come, alone. It's important. I'm on my way, sweetheart. Stay there. Now she stood in the center of the dusty living room, Marcelo hidden in the shadows near the door, waiting. When Will walked through the entrance, relief flooded his face. Adeline, thank God. I've been so worried. He froze when he saw Marcelo step out from the darkness, gun already drawn. Kang. Will's hand moved toward his own weapon. Don't. Marcelo's voice was dead calm. You'll be dead before you touch it. Will slowly raised his hands, his eyes darting between Marcelo and Adeline. So this is how it ends. My own daughter setting me up. Dad, please. Adeline's voice cracked. I need to talk to you. Before this happens. Before he kills me, you mean? Will's laugh was bitter. At least you're honest about it. Just listen to me. She moved closer, tears already streaming down her face. The trafficking operation. Marcelo when he was 7 years old. Yuna. All those lives you destroyed. Please, Dad. Tell me you regret it. Tell me you understand what you did was wrong. Give me something, anything, that shows the man who raised me is still in there somewhere. Will looked at her for a long moment. And for a second, Adeline thought she saw something soften in his expression. Then it hardened again. I did what I had to do to survive in this world, he said flatly. To build an empire, to give you everything you ever wanted. Those children, they had no future. I provided opportunities. That's business. Business? Adeline's voice rose. You exploited them. They were children. I ran an operation that connected supply with demand. That's how the world works, Adeline. That's how I built everything we have. And Yuna, what about her? She was innocent. A mother. What purpose did killing her serve? Will shrugged, actually shrugged. Kang was getting too comfortable, too powerful. Someone needed to remind him that no one is untouchable. His wife was convenient. A message. The casual cruelty of it made Adeline feel sick. She was a person, Dad. A human being with a life and a family and dreams. And you murdered her to prove a point. I did what needed to be done for my business. Will's eyes were cold, empty. Just like I've always done. Just like you would do if you had the spine for this life. But you don't. You never did. You're weak, Adeline. Just like your mother was. Dad, please. Adeline was sobbing now. Please just say you're sorry. Say you regret it. Give me something. Sorry? Will's voice turned sharp, cruel. I'm sorry I wasted my time and money sending you to medical school so you could play saint in refugee camps. I'm sorry I didn't see that you'd turn into a traitor who'd betray her own blood for some criminal who kidnapped you. I'm sorry I ever had a daughter as weak and pathetic as you turned out to be. The words hit Adeline like physical blows. She stumbled back, her hand over her mouth, trying to hold in the sob that wanted to escape. That's enough. Marcelo's voice cut through the room like a blade. He moved forward, gun raised, his face a mask of cold fury. Wait. Adeline held up her hand even though she was shaking. Dad, last chance. I'm begging you. Show me there's something worth saving. Show me the man who used to read me bedtime stories, who taught me to ride a bike, who told me I could be anything I wanted to be. Will looked at her, and for just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or recognition of what he'd lost. Then it was gone. That man is dead, he said quietly. He died a long time ago. This is who I am now, Adeline. This is who I've always been underneath the lies. And if you can't accept that, then you were never really my daughter anyway. Adeline closed her eyes, fresh tears streaming down her face. When she opened them again, they were clear. Resolved. Okay, she whispered. She looked at Marcelo and nodded. Okay. She stepped back, moved to the side, creating distance. Marcelo raised his weapon, aiming it at Will with steady hands. Any last words? Will straightened his shoulders, meeting Marcelo's gaze with defiant pride. Do it. But know this, Kang. My people will come for you. They'll come for her. This doesn't end with my death. Your people will scatter like rats when they find out you're dead, Marcelo said coldly. You were powerful, Smith. But I'm more powerful, and everyone knows it. Your empire dies with you tonight. We'll see. Will's smile was cruel. Even from the grave, The gunshot echoed through the small space, impossibly loud. Will's body fell to the floor, still in defiant surprise. For a moment, no one moved. The silence after the gunshot was deafening. Then Adelaine's knees gave out. She collapsed onto the dusty floor, her hands covering her face, and sobbed. Great, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep in her chest, from the little girl who'd once believed her father was a hero, from the woman who'd just watched that illusion shatter completely and permanently. He's gone, she gasped between sobs. He's really gone. Marcelo lowered his gun, the weapon suddenly feeling heavy in his hand. He looked at Will's body, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Then he looked at Adelaine, broken and sobbing on the floor, and felt his chest tighten. He moved to her, kneeling down, pulling her into his arms. "I'm sorry, Piccola," he murmured against her hair. "I'm sorry you had to see that." He didn't care. Her voice was muffled against his chest. He didn't care about any of it. Not the children. Not Yuna. Not even me. He felt nothing. There was nothing left of the man I loved. I know. I wanted him to be sorry. I wanted him to show me there was something worth saving. But there was nothing. Just nothing. Her sobs grew harder. He called me weak. Pathetic. He said he was sorry he ever had me as a daughter. He was a fool. Marcelo's voice was fierce as he held her tighter. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. You survived me at my worst. You loved Ji-ho when you had every reason to hate anything connected to me. You chose to see the good in a monster. That's not weakness, Piccola. That's strength beyond anything your father could comprehend." "But he was still my father," she whispered, pulling back to look at him with red, swollen eyes. "And I'm allowed to grieve for who he used to be, even if that man died a long time ago." "Yes." Marcelo wiped her tears with his thumbs. "You're allowed to grieve." She cried for a long time, holding on to Marcelo like he was the only solid thing in a world that had just shifted beneath her feet. And he let her, stroking her hair, murmuring soft words in Italian, being the anchor she desperately needed. Finally, her sobs quieted to hiccups, then to silence. She pulled back, wiping her face with shaking hands. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Now I make sure this ends cleanly." Marcelo stood, helping her to her feet. "I'll send word to his organization that their leader is dead, that anyone who wants to retaliate will meet the same fate. Most will scatter. Some will try to take over what's left. But without your father, they're nothing. And us?" He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "We go home. We hold Ji-ho. We build the life we talked about. This was the last piece, Adeline. It's over now." "Is it?" She searched his eyes. "Are you at peace?" Marcelo thought about that. He'd imagined this moment for years, imagined Will Smith's death would fill the hole Yuna's murder had left inside him. But standing here, looking at Adeline's tear-stained face, her grief for a father who didn't deserve it, he realized something. Killing Will hadn't healed him. It had brought justice, yes. Closure, maybe. But not healing. What had healed him was this. The woman in his arms who'd chosen him despite everything. The little boy waiting for them at home who called him Papa. The family they'd built from broken pieces. "I'm getting there," he said honestly. "Thanks to you." They left the safe house together, leaving Will's body for Marcelo's men to handle. As they drove through Seoul's dark streets, Adeline leaned against his shoulder, exhausted and grieving but no longer alone. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, Piccola." His arm tightened around her. "And I promise you, we're going to build something beautiful from all this pain." She believed him. 6 months later, the garden at Marcelo's mansion was transformed. White flowers bloomed everywhere, their petals catching the afternoon sunlight. Chairs were arranged in careful rows, filled with people who'd become family. Adeline stood in front of a mirror, wearing a dress of ivory silk that made her feel like she was floating. Kioma stood behind her, adjusting the veil with gentle hands, tears in her eyes. "You look beautiful," Kioma said softly. A knock on the door, and Ji-ho burst in wearing a tiny suit that made him look impossibly grown up. "Mama, Papa says it's almost time. I get to carry the rings." He paused, his face serious. "Is it okay that I call you Mama? For real?" Adeline knelt down, pulling him into a fierce hug, tears already streaming down her face. "It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's perfect." "Don't cry, Mama." Ji-ho's small hand patted her face. "Happy days don't have crying." "These are happy tears," she promised, "the best kind." When the music started, when Adeline walked down that aisle with Kioma beside her, she only had eyes for the man waiting at the altar. Marcelo looked devastating in his black suit, his hair pulled back, his eyes tracking her every movement with possessive intensity. And when she reached him, when he took her hands in his, she saw everything she needed to see. Love. Real, deep, transformative love. "We're doing this right this time," he murmured, just for her. "No drugs, no force, no lies. Just you and me, choosing each other." "I choose you," she whispered. "Every time, in every life, I choose you." They'd written their own vows. When Marcelo spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. He no longer tried to hide. "You saved me twice, Piccola. Once with your hands when I was bleeding out, and once with your heart when I was drowning in darkness and rage. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that gift. I promise to love you fiercely, protect you always, and never let you forget that you are mine just as I am yours." Adeline's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. "I promise to love you with everything I am, to stand by you in darkness and light, to help you heal the wounds that still ache. And I promise to love Ji-ho like he's my own, because in every way that matters, he is. Together, we'll build something beautiful from all the broken pieces." When they kissed, it felt like a beginning and an ending all at once. The reception was held in the garden that Yuna had once loved. Music and laughter filled the air, replacing years of silence and grief with joy. Ji-ho ran between tables, showing everyone his ring-bearer badge with pride. In a quiet corner, on a small table draped in white silk, sat a photograph of Yuna. She smiled in the picture, young and beautiful, surrounded by the flowers she'd planted. Marcelo stood before it for a long moment, Adeline beside him. "She would have liked you," he said softly. "She would have wanted this. For Ji-ho to have a mother. For me to find love again." "I hope so." Adeline leaned into him. "I'll never try to replace her, but I'll love him the way she would have wanted, the way he deserves." "I know." He pulled her close. "That's why this works, Piccola. That's why you're perfect for us." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ji-ho ran up to them. "Papa, Mama, come dance with me." Marcelo laughed and scooped his son into his arms. "What do you say, Mrs. Kang? Shall we dance?" Mrs. Kang. The title sent a thrill through her. "We shall," she said, taking Ji-ho's small hand in hers. They danced together as the last light faded into evening. Marcelo held Ji-ho, who held Adeline's hand, the three of them moving in a circle, laughing as Ji-ho tried to lead them. And as Marcelo looked at his son's joy and his wife's radiant smile, he realized something profound. Revenge had brought him justice. It had closed a chapter that needed closing. But it hadn't brought him peace. Peace had come from this. From choosing to build instead of destroy. From letting love in instead of keeping it out. From accepting that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about making room for a future. "What are you thinking?" Adeline asked. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," he said, pulling her and Ji-ho both closer. "That despite everything, All the pain, all the darkness, I somehow ended up here, with you, with him, with this life we've built. We saved each other, she said softly. Yes. He kissed her forehead, then Ji-ho's. We did. And if you've been captivated by Marcelo and Adeline's journey from hatred to love, from revenge to redemption, from brokenness to healing, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories that will make your heart race and your soul ache in the best way. Drop a comment below and tell me what you thought of their transformation. Did Marcelo's choice move you? Did Adeline's grief feel real? And smash that like button if you believe that even the most broken people can find their way back to wholeness when they find the right person to heal with. Thank you for watching this story of love born from darkness, of family built from ashes, of two people who prove that sometimes the best revenge is choosing to live well. I'll see you in the next story.